Windows 10 for the enterprise. Presenting for us today, please welcome Group Product Marketing Manager Brad McCabe. Brad, you now have the floor.
Thank you. So I'm Brad McCabe. I'm a Group Product Marketing Manager here in the Windows Group, responsible for looking after the overall Windows 10 enterprise value prop and story end-to-end. So we've been talking to customers for quite some time now about Windows 10. We started very early in our development cycle, talking with them, looking at the challenges that they faced, and really working through what the solution and the product should look like. And as we started talking to customers, we really saw there was this very natural tension that was forming up. On one hand, what we heard from our customers is they had a whole lot of things on their plate, right? They had just so much work to do. And this was pretty much across the spectrum, whether we talk to IT pros, whether we talk to users, developers. They had a huge amount of projects and work that they wanted to do, personal things that they wanted to do, but then they also had this just huge, massive backlog of things that they had to do, right? They were getting pulled kind of in these two directions of trying to get through these different things. And as we talked more to IT, what you could really see was, in addition to this tension that pretty much existed across the spectrum, there was also an additional pull that IT was really struggling with, and a tension that they were facing, which was this balance for them between trying to maintain the status quo, trying to keep mission-critical systems up and running, trying to make sure users were always available, always productive, always working, while at the same time the business expected them to keep this rock-solid stability. The business was also pulling them to be more agile, to stay ahead of the competition, to quickly roll out new technologies, which was a little bit polar opposite of trying to maintain a lot of that status quo, keep those thousands of apps working, as well as creating new and innovative solutions. So as we looked around, we could really see these two main tension points pulling and sort of tugging in all directions on folks. And so as we thought about Windows 10, and we looked at this, what we really wanted to do with Windows 10 was really enable people of action to go out and do these great things that they wanted to do, right? It was about helping people with Windows get things done, and to get the things done that they wanted to get done and that they also had to get done, and helping to balance that tension. And also supporting IT in all of that. And so as we think about IT and how we help them solve that tension with Windows 10, it's really about four main investment areas. So as we thought about everything, we really ladder up to these four areas. The first one, and we'll look at each one of these in great detail today, but the first one is for us, it's about making users more productive. This is where we think about a lot of things like the user experience or Office or the modern web browsing, universal apps. These types of things for us fall into this productivity bucket. It's important to have a great user experience, and a user experience that users love and they're familiar with and they feel comfortable with. But it's also important to make sure that that experience is not only fun and enjoyable, but also productive and helps them get things done. Now, having a great operating system and a great user experience is only part of the equation. We've done a lot of work with Windows 10 to enable a lot of innovative devices. We've done a lot of work with OEMs and partners to make these innovative devices so that users can take these devices, not just for the sake of having a shiny new device or the latest, coolest piece of technology, but so that they could take these devices and actually make things happen that they wanted to get done. Now, as you think about it, though, you You've got great devices, a great operating system, but you really, in this modern age, have to make sure that you have the absolute highest possible protection against modern security threats that you can provide. And with Windows 10, we've continued. You saw a lot of focus on security with Windows 7. You saw that really ramp up and a lot of focus and enhancements on security in the Windows 8 timeframe. And you see that continue at a very, very fast pace with Windows 10. And lastly, all of this innovation would be very hard and challenging for IT if we didn't work on a lot of solutions to make it very easy to deploy, make it easy to get out there. Once it's out there, to make it easy for management to make sure that it is always running in that state that you want it to run at. In addition to that, to make sure that those management and deployment technologies work together in a way that allow you to have a continuous stream of innovation and stay as current as possible. Now, as you think about Windows 10 and you think about all these different areas, it's important to understand that we started with one very solid principle that we built all of these pillars on top of, and that was about having one converged platform. As you look at devices in the world today, in the enterprise today, and around, you see this huge breadth of devices. You see a world where devices outnumber, in most cases, the number of users, right? And we're not just talking about laptops and desktops and tablets, but you're starting to see smartphones pretty ubiquitous on just about everyone. You're starting to see some new form factors, things like the Internet of Things and all of these devices and sensors coming into the enterprise. You see these new categories of things like Surface Hub or HoloLens that are going to start to move into the enterprise. And so it was really important to us to have one converged platform to help reduce a lot of that complexity, while at the same time making sure we had one security platform and one management platform and a familiar experience that scaled across those devices, one universal app platform all across these devices. And by doing that, we were able to take this experience, this user experience, and scale it across all of these different devices to make users productive. And we started from a couple of different places here with some very key tenets as we thought about this. First off, it was really important for us to make sure that Windows 10 was very easy for Windows 7 users. We wanted it to feel very familiar. We wanted it to feel very natural. But at the same time, we wanted it to feel very modern. We wanted it to be more productive and have all the great things they love about Windows 7, but carry this forward. So you see a lot of things here. So while the Start menu from Windows 7 has returned in Windows 10, you also see that live tiles, something we got a lot of great feedback on, right? Customers told us they love having the tiles always up to date with information. They love being able to know information about an application without having to launch that application. We did hear some feedback from customers that, that they didn't like when it went full screen. They didn't like some of the user experience changes on their desktop with Windows 8. So you see we've addressed a lot of that by bringing live tiles when it comes to their desktop into that start screen experience for them. But while we have this familiar UX, we scale it in a logical way across devices. So if you want to go into tablet mode, if you have a tablet, we can stretch that start menu into that very touch-friendly full-screen version, or we can have it very small down in the corner for you if you like that mouse and keyboard friendly version of it. It's the same apps, it's your same programs, it's just scaled across the devices for you. We can have an interface on the phone that feels familiar and natural but makes sense on the phone. Same thing on the other end of the spectrum with things like the Surface Hub. You can have that functionality there. And it's really about making users feel natural so that they're immediately productive and they can continue to be productive. But we take that productivity farther than just how you launch apps. You see lots of enhancements, things like Snap Assist. As we looked at a lot of the data, We found that as soon as a user snapped an app, in most cases, the next thing they did was snap an app to the other side. So things like Snap Assist, try to make that faster and more efficient for users. As monitors have gotten bigger and higher DPI, we've brought in things like quadrant snap, so you can make a lot more robust layouts very, very quickly with Snap. We've learned that over time, as things have gotten more complex, trying to just snap a set of windows to 1 or 2 or 3 monitors, depending how many you have, can become very overwhelming. So we've introduced things like additional desktops so that you can have project-based desktops. One where you're working maybe on a big presentation. You can have another set of windows open on a second desktop where you're working on, say, an expense report. And you can have a third desktop out there with a bunch of windows, say, where you're doing mail and some other routine task. And it's very easy to switch between those apps, but it's also very easy to switch between those desktops and kind of keep your windows and your functions siloed around projects or whatever else makes sense for you there. Now, user productivity is not just with the things that the operating system does, but it's also about the apps that run on that platform. We introduced with Windows 8.1 and Phone 8.1 this concept of universal Windows apps, and we've carried this forward and continued to enhance it and grow it with Windows 10. So with universal apps, you can take and write one app and have it run across all of your Windows devices. And it's not just the same UI rendering on every single device. These apps can be smart enough so your business logic and all of your code that you've written to do those types of processing can go across all of these different form factors. You can write it once, you can test it once, and then you can run it on all these form factors. But you can also have the UI adapt and adjust itself so that you get a rich UI that makes sense on the device you're using, while you still have the same app to manage underneath the hood. You still got the same code underneath there. And now, not only can you write all of these great universal apps for all of your line of business needs, but here at Microsoft, we've actually taken as well and written a lot of our apps on this platform. Probably the biggest and most notable one is Office. So with Windows 10, we will introduce new versions of Office that will run on this universal app platform. So we'll bring that familiar experience of Office not just to the desktop, but to tablets, to Windows phones, to 2-in-1s, to all of these Windows form factors. That version of Office is built for touch and mobile. You'll still have a rich, deep interface for Office if you want to continue to use mouse and keyboard for a lot of these very complex and integral tasks that a lot of people use Office for. But you'll also have these universal apps to increase your productivity, whether you're on a tablet, whether you've detached your 2-in-1, whether you're using your phone. You'll be able to do these things like mail and calendaring. You'll be able to do great things like, for example, go into a customer with just your Windows phone and run your PowerPoint presentation with full PowerPoint right on your phone and do your presentation right from your phone. If you need to, while you're on the go with your phone, and do something like a quick edit to a Word document, maybe a quick change to an Excel spreadsheet to send back to someone, all of that rich functionality is there. And because it's a universal app, this user experience with Office will adjust. So the experience that you have on the phone will make sense on the phone, but it will still be Office, and it will be the full version. The experience you get on your tablet or your laptop will make sense on that form factor as well. Not only with Office can you run these universal apps, but you can do it with a lot of other areas as well. And one of those is web browsing. But before we talk about Project Spartan and some new modern web browsing, I did want to take a second to continue to talk about Internet Explorer. So Internet Explorer will continue to be available on Windows 10. It continues to be enhanced and updated, so Internet Explorer 11 running on Windows 10 will be the most secure version of Internet Explorer we've produced to date. It will continue to work and continue to be enhanced so that it will run the modern Edge engine so that it's always up to date for tomorrow's websites and all of those great new HTML5 websites out on the internet. But it also still has a lot of things like the Trident rendering engine, things like enterprise mode that we introduced about a year ago. All of that backwards compatibility and functionality will be there in Internet Explorer on Windows 11. So not only will it render tomorrow's websites great, as well as today's websites, but all of that backwards compatibility will be there to render your websites and a lot of these line of business apps that have been around for many years in the organization. Not only will we bring enterprise mode forward with a lot of the great a lot of the great IE8 support that we had, but we'll also continue to enhance enterprise mode to support things like IE9 and IE10 in enterprise mode as well. So as you think about moving to Windows 10, Windows 11 and getting on Windows 11, Internet Explorer 11, whether that is Windows 7 or Windows 8, is your fastest path forward to Windows 10. Now, we also at the end of January introduced a new browser, a browser that we internally call Project Spartan as its code name. And Project Spartan is built for the modern web, so it has that modern Edge rendering engine that we were just talking about with Internet Explorer as well. And it is built for that modern web, but it also introduces a lot of great new UI features in it as well. It's the only browser out there built for built-in note-taking and sharing, so I can quickly mark up, write with pen and ink right on a web page, and immediately share that web page with a colleague of mine, with a family member of mine, anyone that I need to share that with. It has great functionality for things like reading, to optimize around that, to clear out a lot of this clutter like ads and other things that you see on a lot of these web pages so that you can focus on the content in hand. And last, it is the only browser out there that is fully integrated with Cortana. So if I'm searching for information, I'm looking at a web page, I can quickly highlight a word on that web page and have Cortana give me more information. Maybe it's directions, maybe it's information about a menu item, information about a contact, whatever that word is. Cortana can process that and give me a lot of that information to make the web even more productive for me. Now, as we were saying, it's not just about having a great operating system and experience there, but it's also about having a lot of innovative devices to get things done and make things happen. And Windows 10 works great on those existing devices that are out there. So as you're looking across the fleet of devices inside of a customer and they're thinking about upgrading to Windows 10, know that Windows 10 will work great on the vast majority of that hardware out there. Now, obviously, that great experience of Windows 10 is going to be limited by the hardware that they have. So, clearly it goes without saying that if the machine is 5 years old and it's mouse and keyboard only, installing Windows 10 on it is not going to magically make that Windows 10 device have touch, right? If the hardware didn't have it, it doesn't have it. If you install Windows 10 on a device that's really old and doesn't have a TPM chip in it, you're not going to be able to take advantage of the hardware-based security of Windows 10. But within the limits of that hardware, Windows 10 will work and you'll have a great experience with it. But as customers think about that existing hardware that they've got, and as they think about new purchases that they can make, it's important to understand that Windows 10 goes beyond for them in the enterprise just that hardware. And you can take any device out there and you can make it what we call an industry-ready device right out of the box. Right? And what we mean by this is you can buy commercial-grade or consumer-grade devices, these commodity devices that we see in the market, and you can quickly turn them with Windows 10 into, say, the check-in kiosk at the airport or a self-service device at a doctor's office or You can use a phone, for example, and turn it into a device to process payments in the cabin of the airplane. Whole host of options that you can come up with and dream about, all based on those existing commodity pieces of hardware. But there's a broad ecosystem of choice with Windows. So not only can you use those commodity devices, but in some cases, maybe industry-specific or ruggedized devices make sense. So if you need a device that has a built-in credit card reader, you can choose to do that. If you need a ruggedized device that can be sanitized or deal with high heat or drops, you can purchase those. You can also take Windows 10 and use it to build purpose-built industry solutions. ATM machines, Coke Freestyle machines, embedding it in automotive applications. All of that can be done with Windows 10 right out of the box. There's a lot of different functionalities and features that you can use here. In addition, you can take and continue to use it for a full line of retail support. So whether it's a purpose-built device, whether it is a industry or a rugged device, or whether you're repurposing some of that commodity hardware, you can add barcode scanners, printers, cash drawers, mag strip readers, all of those different types of peripherals that you need in the retail support. And we've got great functionality and support in there for you. Now, with Windows 10, not only does it work across existing hardware, not only does it allow you to do a lot of these industry solutions, but we continue to work and drive the evolution of device innovation forward. We do a lot of work with our OEMs and our partners to make sure we've got great experiences around pen. It's a very natural input mechanism that lives alongside touch as a first-class citizen. It lives alongside mouse and keyboard as a first-class citizen. Makes a lot of sense, especially in tablets and a lot of these two-in-ones. We continue to work with the ecosystem to drive touch forward to make that an even better experience. And both of these, along with a lot of the UX changes, things like Continuum that we introduce in Windows 10 to make a great experience for two-in-ones, continues to push that space forward. We continue to see two-in-ones as a lot of interest from customers, especially around laptop replacement opportunities. So while they think about Windows 10 running great on their existing hardware, there's a lot of hardware innovation out there that customers should also be thinking very, very seriously about what type of hardware are they going to do with their hardware refreshes as they start to come up. Do those hardware refreshes make sense? Should they maybe start to accelerate them because of some of the new experiences that Windows 10 will bring for them? Now, it's not just about innovating in the current device form factor. With Windows 10, it's also about pushing in to new areas and bringing revolutionary devices into business. And as I think about this, I think about three really large segments here. One is the Internet of Things, or IoT. For a lot of enterprises, they have not brought IoT devices into their industry. So what does that mean for them? What does HoloLens and devices like that mean for them? And what does things like Surface Hub mean for them? These are new things for customers to start to think about. And as trusted advisors, it's really important for us to start having discussions with customers and to start helping them understand how to think about these devices. And one of the biggest ones that a lot of these customers are starting to think about is the Internet of Things. And Windows 10 does a lot of work to help drive this and enable this for customers. As they start to bring in these sensors and these devices into their enterprise, this one Windows, this fundamental pillar that we talked about earlier, really starts to come into play for them. Because as they start to bring all these different devices in, they have to think about securing them. They have to think about managing them. They have to think about, if they have a user experience, how do they manage it and connect it to the cloud. With it being one common platform of Windows across all of these devices, it makes that much easier for them to think about. It makes it much easier as they have got massive numbers of new devices coming out to help reduce that cost and streamline that complexity. As they start to think about putting these sensors in, and they have to think about all these new sensors, and they have to think about still managing their laptops, and they have to think about all of these new tablets, and they have to think about more and more users getting cell phones. They have to think about new things like Surface Hub and HoloLens. This one Windows across everything really helps to reduce that complexity for them. And with IoT, as these devices come into their organization, as these devices are connected to their network, it's important for them to think about security. And we bring a lot of those security concepts from our years of experience with Windows right into that IoT platform. So we are helping to try to make sure that as these connected devices come into their network, that we do everything that we can as Microsoft through the platform to help reduce these new attack vectors and to help make sure that we provide them that advanced security that they need to keep that going. We also make sure, as we were talking about, that we help them also lock these devices down and really focus on these devices to make sure that they have the best possible experience for their users out there. IoT is incredibly important to be cloud connected. That's one of the core value props and promises of these devices. The ability to gather all of that information from these devices and sensors, to load it into a cloud-based service such as Windows or Microsoft Azure, and be able to process that through a lot of the big data and analytics tools that we have available through Microsoft. We have years and years of experience in this connectivity space. We have massive amounts of investments in the cloud and the analytics space. And you really get, with Windows 10 and Microsoft Azure, you really get a good end-to-end experience and story here. We also continue to push out beyond IoT with things like Surface Hub to make sure that we make meetings and we make collaboration. We bring it into the 21st century, and we really work to unlock the power of the group with a lot of this functionality. We've done a lot of great work there with things like Surface Hub to make sure that we do this. We've also done a lot of work and a lot of innovation with things like HoloLens to completely transport the user into this world where their digital life or their digital work life and their personal life or their work life is seamlessly blended together. A lot of great new scenarios, whether it's around CAD, whether it's around looking at products that aren't finished yet, retail sales, and trying to visualize customizing a bike, whether it is remote support, so many new scenarios that as customers and partners, folks will continue to dream up and imagine with things like HoloLens. But now as I think about all of these devices, I can have great experiences with an operating system, and I can have a huge array of great new devices. But in this modern world, security is paramount for me with that. And I think, most of us know, but sometimes it's important to sort of step back to realize that we're really realizing a revolution of cyber threats that we've seen over the last few years. There's this change from this model of things that we're familiar with to these new models. We've all been familiar with cybercrime, but now we see this evolution of cyber espionage and cyber warfare and cyber terror. We see this focus shift from this set of attacks on the Fortune 500 to the attackers going after any target. If I want to get into a Fortune 500 company and I want to get to their data, I don't have to take them on head on and try to go through all of their security. It's very easy for me to attack their vertical suppliers, their subcontractors. It's very easy for me to go after phishing schemes with line individuals and attack those smaller businesses that they deal with and work. So security is really everyone's problem. It's not something we can just dismiss and say, oh, I'm not a Fortune 500 company. It's not just about malware. It's about advanced persistent threats and about credential theft at scale. And you can really see this if you look at the evolution of attacks, right? If we think back 2003, 2004, 10, 12 years ago, right, the biggest thing you had to worry about was a computer science kid who couldn't get a date on Friday night, right? He had nothing better to do, so, maybe for a little mischief, maybe for a little fame and glory, I'm going to try to write a virus or attack a network. And you saw things like Blaster and Slammer that were very much in this script kiddie type of vein. But over time, this has continued to evolve. So as we look forward, you saw about 2005 running into the present, this shift where organized crime started to become more and more involved, that it wasn't just about mischief and fame and glory, but it was about motives like profit. And so I could do things like ransomware, where I could get malware on your machine, and if you didn't pay me, I would shut you down in your organization, or I'd hold your data hostage. You saw things like click fraud, identity theft, the theft of credit cards, all really about profit. But as we look, if you look starting about 2-3 years ago, we've really started to see this change where now we see this rise of nation-state activities, terror groups, where their motives are not about profit. The standard set of defenses of if I build a high enough wall and a big enough wall, they'll go deal with the other guy and leave me alone. Those types of defensive mentality, if I just make it complicated enough, they will give up. Those don't apply with these new actors in the security space. They are targeting specific things, and they are going after specific people, and cost is not a motivator for them. It's also not something that persuades them from their goal. And you can see this change if you just look at some of these attacks that you've seen over the years, right? If you think back a few years ago to Target, this was really an attack that was based around stealing some usernames and passwords and then really moving laterally through the network with a goal to steal millions of credit cards. Very profit-based type of attack. You saw some of these attacks, for example, a couple of years ago with Lockheed Martin, where you start to see some of these new actors really coming into place, and you see things where people are going after specific IP, in this case cyber spies going after weapons. But a lot of organizations can be very dismissive. They can say, oh, I'm not a Fortune 500. Hey, I'm not Lockheed. I don't have the defense plans for a major nation state. I don't have weapons systems. But if you really look within the last couple of months, you just take a look at the breach with Sony. Sony is a movie, right, producer. Sony Pictures makes movies. They don't make super secret fighter jets. They are not a banking institution. They're not holding millions of credit card numbers. They make movies. And one of those movies took and offended someone. And that someone happened to be a nation-state actor. They didn't care what it cost. They went after Sony systematically after everything that they could go after, one thing after another, and they were able to break through a username and password and then use that to move through. Their goal with Sony was not to steal credit cards. Their goal wasn't to sit there as quietly as they can and collect data. Their goal was to destroy Sony, a completely different paradigm than we've seen. And they didn't just do things like dump their IP on the internet, right? They went after Sony's employees. They took and posted all their salary information. They sent emails to their employees, really threatening them and really after this motivation of destroying the company regardless of cost, just because they got a little upset over a movie, right? Completely different paradigm. And so as we think with Windows 10, how do we defend this? How do we protect this? We really think about the world through four major buckets: protecting the identity, protecting the data, protecting the device, and protecting and securing the connection. And the first thing that we do is we want to make sure that the person in the chair is who they really say. And we have this thing that internally we've kind of called next generation user credentials, and we'll work in the time ahead here to make sure this has a better name. But next generation user credentials are really about bringing two-factor authentication and killing the password to Windows, and doing that with great convenience for users, because if we make things hard for users, they just don't use it. They work around security solutions. So we want to have a great, easy two-factor experience, whether that two-factor is their biometrics, their fingerprint, or other biometrics things that we can do to make it easier for them, whether that second factor is a certificate stored safely in the TPM, so physical possession of the device is a second factor, whether that second factor is a cert stored safely in a phone, so it's a PIN and the phone coupled with the PC. Lots of different options that users have here to ensure that it's not just a username and password. It's not their kid's name or their dog's name or some really complex alphanumeric thing that IT created for them, so they stuck it on a Post-it note on their monitor, but rather that it is something that they have a lot of possession over. And we expand this with server infrastructure, right? So you see a lot of great things through things like Intune, where I can make sure that users aren't logging in from, say, the United States and Eastern Europe or Asia, 2 hours apart from each other, where they can do physically impossible travel. So lots of great things you can do with Windows, but also lots of great ways you can expand it with other Microsoft products. And as we have secure identities, it's about making sure that we have choice for those identities as well. So we want to make sure that not only can you do all of the existing things you do today with Active Directory, and we can continue to move Active Directory forward, and we can continue to use Active Directory with these multi-factor things that we were just talking about, but it's also about taking that directory where it makes sense for customers and taking it to the cloud. And things like Azure Active Directory become a first-class citizen in Windows 10. So customers can use Active Directory just like they do today. Customers can use all Azure Active Directory if they choose to. Customers can also, with Microsoft and Windows 10, use hybrid solutions. So if they want to use a combination of their existing Active Directory along with Azure Active Directory, they can do that to enable a lot of these new scenarios while still opening things up, making users more productive, but still with things like next generation user credentials ensuring that user security. So with Windows 10, they can leverage both, and they can look at which one or a hybrid solution is right. On-prem, cloud, or hybrid is their option. Now, once we've secured as much as we can do, and we've done that work to secure the user identity, then we think about securing the user data. And one of the ways we do that is by introducing this thing which we internally also call enterprise data protection. Just like next generation user credentials, we will come up and we will announce a more public marketing name for it. Enterprise data protection is our internal working name. But what this does, whether we call it Enterprise Data Protection or EDP, it's about providing data protection on the data wherever it goes. It's about enabling me as a user or IT through pushing policies to protect enterprise data when it lives on that device and separating that data from personal data. So if I encrypt, say in my case I work for Microsoft, so if I encrypt all of my Microsoft files, either myself or through policies that Microsoft IT pushes to me with the Microsoft key, and then when I use my device and I generate and I create personal data, I could leave that unencrypted or encrypt it with my own keys if I desired. And therefore, not only do I get protection, but I get a very user-friendly data separation. And that can then go with the data. So if the data moves from that device to another device, that protection can go with it. If that data moves from a device that happens to be, say, a desktop or a tablet, and it moves to a device that happens to be a phone or a mobile device, that protection can go with it wherever it goes. Now, if I've got the identity secured and more locked down than I've had in the past with, say, Windows 7, and I use things like Enterprise Data Protection to move the needle forward on securing the data compared to where I've been with Windows 7, then I can continue to think about securing the device and the connection as well and moving that forward. And we have a lot of things that we do here. We introduced a lot of great hardware-based security features, things like Secure Boot and Trusted Boot with Windows 8. For a lot of customers who will go from Windows 7 to Windows 10, all of that hardware-based security that we did in the Windows 8 timeframe will be net new for them, and all of that is there for them to take advantage of and to get additional security functionality from. But we move it forward even more with Windows 10. We do a lot of work to ensure that device and platform integrity is there and that the device is hard to compromise, and if it is, it's easy for IT to figure out with things like provable PC health, and they can take and have the device prove its health, and if not, ring fence it, give it a different level of security. We do a lot of work to make sure that we do things and that we have active threat protection, that we're not just passively sitting there hoping to catch something afterwards. We also introduce a new feature that we call Device Guard. And Device Guard is really about allowing users to completely lock a device down. So it'll be for certain scenarios where I want absolutely the highest level of security. But with Device Guard, I can lock it down so that only code signed by either the customer or Microsoft will run on that device. So that includes drivers, that includes things downloaded from the internet. If it's not signed by the organization, the code will not execute. It's great for high security environments. It's great for, say, locking down a device that's a single purpose, like some of those kiosk devices that we were talking about earlier, to ensure that maybe I've got a point of sale system, I sign my point of sale. I know that if someone somehow compromises that device, they can't introduce malware onto that device to, say, skim my credit cards from it. And it's also a lot of work that we do around securing VPN and continuing to do things with VPN to move that forward, whether it's always connected VPN or app-specific VPN. Now, it's important to bring a lot of this innovation out in a way that customers can consume it and stay current. So the first thing to kind of talk about is management. We will continue to work with the existing infrastructure that is out there. So group policy, system center, all of this infrastructure continues to be first-class citizens with Windows 10, continues to be fully supported. But we also take and we give customers options and choices. So we will greatly enhance the functionality that we do with MDM. We will bring that not just to the phone, where we've had it from Windows 8 and Windows 8.1, but we'll also bring that, since it's one Windows, across the entire stack. So if a customer chooses to manage a subset or even all of their devices if they wanted to, whether that's tablets, mobile devices, or desktops and laptops, they'll have very advanced, rich MDM support, and that will be consistent across the family. So the MDM settings and policies that they know for managing mobile devices will apply to PCs and vice versa. And this will fully support first-party solutions. We believe very, very strongly in the MDM space, that Intune is a great option to look at here and to consider here. But we will also support third-party solutions like MobileIron and AirWatch as well. So you can choose between Group Policy and System Center and MDM. You can choose between first and third-party devices. Now, we've really stepped back, though, and we've really reimagined deployment here as well. For existing devices out there, you'll be able to do managed in-place upgrades. So for those fleets of machines out there that are running Windows 7, they will be very easy to take right in place and move them from Windows 7 to Windows 10. So in a managed way, IT can push these out. They can upgrade these. The user, let's say, goes home in the evening, comes back in the morning, or whenever IT chooses to do this, right? They left with a Windows 7 machine, they log back in tomorrow to a Windows 10 machine, their apps are there, their data's there, their settings are there, the machine looks from that point of view just like it was when they left, only now it's got this great new experience of Windows 10. Now that works great for existing devices. For new devices, we introduce the ability to do runtime configuration. So if you want to go out and you buy a set of machines and you need to make changes, say moving it from one SKU to another SKU, or re-provisioning some things, hooking it up to MDM, pushing down some applications, all of that will be able to be done dynamically at runtime. So you'll still have the option to do wipe and reload if you choose to, but we want to make sure that we move wipe and reload from the standard and the default to an option that you choose to do in very specific and very limited cases, really about reducing validation and deployment cost and trying to make deployment as friction-free as possible with deployment. Now, one of the things that you have to do to make it friction-free is you have to think very, very strongly, and you have to be very aware of app and device compatibility. So with Windows 10, we continue not to change the hardware requirements. We've left them unchanged for quite some time, and that will continue. So as we talked about earlier, as you think about existing devices, those hardware requirements don't change in terms of the minimum bar. Obviously, you'll want to think about device refresh if you want to take advantage of some of these new scenarios. If you want devices with biometrics and other things, those will take a hardware refresh, but the hardware requirements don't change. We've done a lot of work to ensure the highest possible level of desktop application compatibility. Now, you can never promise 100% application compatibility. There are so many different applications and configurations out there. There's so many unique applications in the enterprise that we cannot test every single one of them in every single scenario. But we've done a lot of work to make sure that this is as high as possible, and that kind of is the default role. If it runs on Windows 7, there's a high degree of probability that it will run just fine on Windows 10. Same thing with Windows Store apps, right? All of these new apps that customers and partners on this call might have started writing with Windows 8 and Windows 8.1, all of those will move forward with you. And as we talked about, it's not just about apps. Huge number of apps exist as websites and web apps. And we talked about Internet Explorer 11 and a lot of the investments that we've made there to ensure that web compatibility is as high as we can possibly make it. As we think about these things, these are critical because as we think about things like deployment and things like the App Store, as we move things forward, it's really important to generate a great App Store, to do things like volume licensing, flexible distribution, licensing reclaim, allowing customers to make their own company store and private portal, and Windows 10 introduces all of these things. And all of these deployment, management, app compat things really come together with Windows 10 to make Windows 10 really act as a service and to enable Windows as a service. And what we mean by that is the ability to take and allow customers to stay current while still managing that agility and that control. If we think about users out there, kind of on one end of the spectrum is consumers and BYOD devices, where customers as consumers always want the latest and greatest, right? They want the latest updates that come out. And as we think about IT on the other end of the spectrum, there's a lot of mission critical systems. Maybe I've got an air traffic control system. Maybe I'm running the 911 emergency system. Maybe it's a manufacturing machine on the factory floor that's doing drug production, right? So I've got this mission critical at the other end of the spectrum. I've got consumers at the other end of the spectrum. And really getting squeezed in the middle and pulled are these business devices and business users, right? As business users, I want to be current. I don't have to be as current and bleeding edge as a consumer, but at the same time, as a business user, maybe this is someone in marketing or HR or finance or the sales force out in the field, I want some level of currentness. I don't want to be running an operating system that is 3, 4, 5 years old. I want new features. The business is demanding agility that takes some of these new features and innovation coming out. And so we've done a lot of work around the way we have Windows, and we introduce a lot of different concepts, things like current branch for consumer, things like long-term servicing branch for mission-critical systems, things like the current branch for business for these business devices, to really allow customers to have this mix of options that's right for them. They don't have to put all of their devices in any one of these buckets. They can really mix and match across them. So it's important for customers to step back and really start to think about what Windows as a service means for them. It's really important as partners to step back and think about what Windows as a service means for you as well. It's really important to take some time to understand these current branch for business and long-term servicing branch decision points and what they mean. As partners, there's a great opportunity here to provide a lot of value as a trusted advisor for your customers to really start helping them profiling their users and think about how Windows as a service impacts them, how these different branches of Windows impacts them, and really provide them with a lot of information and a lot of value through your services of helping them understand what this means for them. So to kind of bring it around and wrap it up here, really the next steps, if you have not already done so, I highly encourage you to go out and download the Windows 10 tech previews that are out there. To bring these into your lab, look at some of these in-place upgrade things that we talked about, look at some of these line of business apps, start to see some of the compatibility that we've talked about. Now, it's a tech preview. It's not a finished product, so the compatibility will not be as high as the finished product. But if you're looking at some of your apps and you run into an issue or you run into a problem, whether it's apps you've created or apps your customers have, We'd love to hear about that as soon as possible. We want to make sure that those compatibility challenges aren't there at launch time. Now, it's not just about downloading it. We push new versions quite regularly out there in a process that we call flighting. I encourage you to sign up for the Windows Insider program so that you've always got the latest and most current bits out there to take a look at. You can take a look and review and present to customers a lot of the content at the link here, and we will have a lot more series in this Windows 10. We went very, very quickly through a very deep product, and we floated at an extremely high level to sort of give you that end-to-end view. I encourage you to follow up at the link here, sign up for more of these different learning series, look at a lot of the security information, dig into a lot of the management changes. As we talked about, learn about the servicing changes and what it means to your customers and you, and check out a lot of these at the links that you see here. And so with that, I'd like to thank you guys for your time and really wrap things up here. Thank you very much.